Well, howdy there, Internet people. It's Bo again. So today we have a treat. We have a conversation that we're going to have with a candidate from North Dakota. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thanks for having me. I'm Cara Mund. I'm the independent candidate for the U.S. House. Uniquely enough, the Democratic candidate has suspended his campaign, so the race is really down to me as the independent and the Republican incumbent.
All right. So everybody knows you as one thing, former Miss America, right? Let's talk about some of your other qualifications. I heard that at some point you went to college.
I did. I did. Yes. So I was born and raised in Bismarck, North Dakota. I was very active in my community growing up. At 14 years old, I started a charity fashion show here in the state that went on for 10 years, raised over $100,000. So that was really my first figuring out how to kind of run a business on my own. I then went on to Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island, and over spring break, I would come back and do the show. I graduated with honors with a degree in business entrepreneurship organizations. I then, came back to the state and I wanted to be Miss North Dakota. I had tried twice before that. It was my third time. I thought for sure this has got to be it. I didn't win. So I had to figure out a backup plan or, something else to do in the meantime. So I thought, I've always been really interested in politics and decided to go work for our Republican senator in Washington, D.C., someone that I've really admired. So I had that opportunity to be in D.C., and that was back in 2016. So I was there for the 2016 election. But then after that, I came back to the state, and I knew I always wanted to be Miss North Dakota. Went on to become Miss North Dakota, became North Dakota's first Miss America, where I had the opportunity to serve as the National Goodwill Ambassador for the Children's Miracle Network hospitals. So that's kind of where I developed my love for children, for making sure that affordable prescription drugs are available, that people don't have to choose between putting food on the table and prescription drugs to survive. So that's where I really developed that passion. I also was an ambassador for the USO, so I got opportunities I would have never had. And then from there, I went on to Harvard Law School, where I just graduated with honors. I was preparing for the bar while also secretly planning a campaign. Fortunate enough to have passed the bar because if I wouldn't have passed, they would have used it against me. So did all of that, and now I'm fully running a campaign all by myself.
Okay, so that brings up an interesting thing. The you worked for a Republican senator, but you're running as an independent, and there are definitely some noticeable policy differences. So, what caused you to split from the Republican Party, so to speak? And yeah, let's just start with that.
Yeah, yeah. So when I was there in 2016, the party seemed very different than it is now. It seemed okay if you crossed the aisle, it wasn't betrayal to the party. I'm not seeing that now. And specifically in North Dakota, the Republican Party has enacted two new rules. The first is that if you try to seek the nod from any other party, including being an independent, you can't join them for 6 years or get their endorsement for 6 years. The chairman of the North Dakota Republican Party has stated that if I win, I won't even be allowed to walk on stage with the party, even if I'm caucusing with them. So it's something that I don't agree with that just keeps people out. Additionally, the party has also enacted a rule where you have to pay to get their endorsement, and that payment can go all the way up to $5,000. So not only am I seeing the partisanship in DC, but I'm seeing right here within our state these mechanisms that are there. If I thought the same way I thought 6 years ago, I wouldn't be growing, I wouldn't be developing, I wouldn't be innovating. But it's their way or no way. And I think it's been really telling because I stated pretty early on that I thought I would probably caucus with the Republicans. And so when the Democratic candidate dropped out, I mean, it was a guaranteed seat for them. And yet they continue to push that I am this liberal. That's one of the first things that they stated. Mund's a liberal, Mund liberal. And they've known me through the Republican Party. I was a State of the Union guest. I had dinner with Mitch McConnell. Like they know me, and it's not that they want a Republican seat. It's that they want a Republican that they can control, that will vote whatever they say. And that's not a party that I want to be a part of.
Makes sense. So, obviously, there are there are differences between you and the Republican candidate. What's the biggest?
Yeah. My final straw to jump into the race while I was planning a campaign was the Dobbs decision. And specifically now, as a lawyer, recognizing, the Roe decision relied so heavily on your right to privacy. And, that right to privacy opens up to same sex marriage, interracial marriage, right to contraceptives. We knew it was a vulnerable decision. And that's why we asked those nominees under oath, are you going to uphold it as the law of the land? And we knew it was vulnerable, but I don't think anyone ever expected it to truly get overturned. And especially in North Dakota, we don't have a clinic that does elective abortions. So it really is women's health care. And we have one medical school in the state. I've talked to the students there. We're educating these students, we're giving them a great education, and they don't want to stay in North Dakota because they are fearful of being criminalized for just doing their job. So I am the pro-choice candidate, and prior to the Democrat dropping out, he was also an anti-choice candidate. So until I had gotten in, we had two men that were anti-choice, and I didn't feel like I was being represented. We've also never had a female serve in the U.S. House in North Dakota. We're one of 3 states, and now more than ever, following that Dobbs decision, we need more women at the table, and we needed that viewpoint on the ballot.
All right. So what else? I mean, that's a huge one. That's one that, and I definitely think that's going to motivate a lot of voters. But what are some other differences that you might have?
Yeah. Starting back to, so my last year of law school is really when I started thinking about this. And it was in November when the incumbent voted against the infrastructure bill. And in a state like North Dakota, where we have miles of roadway, where there's not towns next door to each other, our bridges, our waterways, we needed that funding. And, even the internet connectivity that it brings to the state, it brings $2 billion to North Dakota. And he voted against it. And our 2 Republican senators voted for it. And it just felt like, again, it's continuously the party over the people. It is whatever Kevin McCarthy states is how we're going to vote. And going into the start of the year, the incumbent was also put on the January 6th committee, and he was approved to be on it. And he had then at that point took himself off and said he wasn't going to participate. And now he's been calling it this choreographed hearing and all this. And it's like, you could have been there. You could have been the voice. And North Dakota has one person in our whole state. You are the lone voice, and you didn't do it. So upholding democracy, we definitely are different on. He stated in our third debate that no matter who the Democratic candidate is, if the Republican candidate is President Trump, he will be voting for President Trump, and that concerns me when we still have 2 years. We don't even know if he's going to be an eligible candidate. And again, it's whatever the party states. And when I pressed him on that January 6th issue, he stated, well, that was a party decision for me not to do it. And it's like, you got to make your own decisions. You can't just do whatever the party tells you to do. Then we go to the infant formula appropriations. He calls it a slush fund. And our mothers, our fathers, they're still struggling to find formula. So voting against that, voting against the cap on insulin, voting against contraceptives, voting against women's reproductive health. He stated that, he really does think that the Dobbs decision should go back to the states. Which, okay, fine, but you had the right then to codify it. And he thinks it should be a state's right. Well, when Lindsey Graham then comes up and brings a ban, that's not the case. The party is completely contradicting themselves. And then at the same point, he voted, and I agree with this, to codify same-sex marriage. So then why aren't you codifying women's reproductive health? And so there's a lot of things we differ on there. And, there's things that we're similar on. I would say like egg, energy issues. We're pretty aligned there. But, basic human rights, that's where we differ. And democracy.
Small differences there. Human
Yeah.
rights to democracy.
If that's our threshold, like, we got to do better.
Right. Okay, so you are the independent. And so you're definitely fighting an uphill battle in the state. But it seems as though your opposition has been spending a whole lot of money to win a very, very red state. What do you is there anything you can take away from that?
Yeah. I think they know that this is a challenge, and I'm glad. I'm glad they should be spending that money. Up until I announced, I had seen no campaign ads. He actually didn't have his website updated since his last race until the end of October when I called it out in the third debate. And I told everyone in the debate, go to his website. He still hasn't even updated it. They just assumed that this was a slam dunk. And so what's interesting to me is so many people say I got into the race late. And I wasn't late. I was very strategic in the sense that I knew if I announced earlier, I would always be facing this uphill battle of not being able to outspend him. Like, I just genuinely, I can't do it. He's a multimillionaire himself. He can fund his campaign. He's given his campaign a $200,000 loan. As someone who just came out of law school, who has student debt, I can't do that. But I can be strategic and bring really unique, innovative ideas to the campaign. So, when we filed our FEC filings, it was talks across the state, right? Like, he's raised $2 million. My first filing, I think I had 77,000. And then in our, report leading up to the election, I had an additional 75,000. But what people aren't realizing is, I'm not taking PAC money. And so that's a big difference between us is, he loves the PAC money. I am not taking the PAC money. But when you look at individual contributions, in 2 months, I outraised his 22 months or 23 months of individual contributions under $200. And it's by quite a bit. I think it's like 45,000 to 19,000. So I just keep reminding myself, people vote, PACs don't vote. And that individual who maxed out their contribution to him, their vote holds the same as the person who gave me a $2 donation.
Right, right. And you're at a point in time when people in rural areas, and I'm sure this is true in North Dakota, while sure there's the tradition of voting Republican, there's also a lot of frustration because it has become everything that Republicans, said the Democratic Party was at one time, beholden to billionaires and doing whatever they're told. And the Republican Party has actually started saying, yes, we're going to do whatever they tell us, which is, that's a bold move. So if you had a message that you wanted to get out specifically to voters in North Dakota, what would it be?
Yeah. You'll pick the person who you think is genuinely going to represent you. Look at our campaign ads. Who's the person that knows what it's like to be a North Dakotan, who knows, the struggles, student loan debt. I've been there. I've got farmers in my family. I think it's interesting how, campaign ads now, specifically my opponent, he's fixing a tractor. I don't know if he's ever fixed a tractor in his life. And a lot of people talk about that, and it's like, who's the person who's trying to just please you to get your vote? And then also, what is their motivation to be in office? Is it for the power, or is it truly to make an impact? And it's interesting because I've been told by a lot of Republicans who are unhappy with me running that I am running supposedly a dirty campaign. And I was told this within the first 48 hours of running because I brought up his voting record. And it's like, I don't know how that's a dirty campaign. That's the facts. Like, it's not my fault he didn't change his website. It's not my fault he votes against women and infants and infrastructure. It's these are the facts. And I think part of it is they don't want that to come to light. And so North Dakotans, I know we are smart individuals. We're hardworking individuals. Our state was identified as the hardest working state just a few months ago. So I know people are interested, are curious, and I just hope that they feel empowered enough to know that you don't have to vote for a candidate just because there's an R behind their name. Vote for the candidate who you truly think is going to represent you and is there for the right reason.
Right. And that's you have the voting record issue. I haven't personally gone through his, but I'm certain that if you hopped on opensecrets.org and saw where most of his money came from, I'd be willing to bet that most North Dakotans wouldn't like that. So you have some stuff going for you. How are you trying to get the message out in this last week? I would imagine you're running yourself ragged.
Yeah, it is a sprint to the end. As much access I can get to people, the most, interviews that I can possibly do. I am confident though on Tuesday I will have no regrets. I'm proud that I didn't take PAC money. It makes it a lot harder, but I continuously state that like the easy road is not always the honorable road, and that is the same with going a party. It's the same with being beholden to special interests. And one of my campaign ads, I talk about, if his voting record aligns with what you want, then vote for him because that's what you're going to get. And I confidently believe that there are North Dakotans who don't align with that and who don't believe in that and who also want their right to privacy. And so it also just, they got to get out to the polls. And so really pushing that is it's great if you support me. It's great if you're commenting on social media and sharing, but at the end of the day, you have to be there to vote because that's what really counts.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's when you're looking at all the polls this year, it's hyper partisan, and it is very much geared towards looking at likely voters versus those who may show up because of the Dobbs decision or just out of pure frustration and anger, which is quite a few. And when we look at, Georgia's early voting and the numbers that are coming in, I know that you're an outside shot. I know you, and I know you know that, but you have to feel like there's still a shot, right?
Yeah, I do. And, we saw it in Kansas. We saw it in Alaska. North Dakota, we also have term limits on our ballot, and we also have marijuana on the ballot, which I think is going to bring out, unique voters as well that probably wouldn't have voted otherwise in a midterm. So, hopefully that some of those voters align with what I'm saying and are also tired of the same old, and we can change that status quo. But I don't think it's impossible. I recognize that it is an uphill battle, but just how you stated, I don't think they would be spending as much if they didn't think I had a shot.
Right. Right. So let's assume you win for a second. You're going to caucus with the Republicans, or you don't know yet?
I don't know yet. I originally assumed Republicans, and I stated that. And then I talked about these rules, and then I stated in one of my very first interviews, but I want to be welcome to the party, and I don't want to be welcomed after I've won. I want to see what you're doing now. And they continue to label me as this liberal. The incumbent had just did an interview earlier this week, and they said, "What's the biggest difference between you two?" And he said, "Well, I'm a conservative, and she's a liberal." And it's the easiest thing they can do is those labels that are attached and what that label supposedly means. And so there's a lot of things that we can do. We can keep pushing. We can, do whatever we can to possibly get there. But I don't think it's impossible.
So, do you have any legislation? Obviously, women's reproductive rights, stuff like that. Is there any legislation you would want to put forth if you got to DC?
So the farm bill is going to be something that really matters to North Dakotans specifically. But I do want to hopefully codify Roe. And I've been very, very clear about that. And so codifying Roe, upholding democracy, where this January 6th committee is going to continue to go. There's a lot of things that I think it'll just depend on which party is the majority, where that's going to be. And I guess that goes back to your caucusing question that I also have is, I'll have a lot more power as an independent if I go with the majority party. And, but I also think that those negotiations when I'm there, when I go for orientation, right after winning, if I do win, it'll be which party is going to be willing to put me on committees, who's going to give me leadership roles. So that'll play a factor as well. But women's reproductive health, potentially capping, insulin prices for all and just affordable prescription drugs across the board. But I think what's so interesting is I'm not afraid to say, like, I'm not an expert in ag. I'm not an expert in energy. But I will have the team, I'll have the support, and I know what North Dakotans need and what they want. And so depending on who that party is, what the circumstances are like, every month it keeps changing. Who knows what January is going to be like? But again, I think that's why it's so crucial you pick a candidate that is going to align with your views because we don't know what's on the horizon.
Sounds great. Okay. Final shot. What do you want to say?
Oh my goodness. So I think what makes my race so unique is that I worked my way onto the ballot. I took a petition around. I got, over double the amount of signatures that I needed in the state. I didn't go to go with a party, which was much harder. I'm not taking PAC money, and I'm also holding like 11 roles right now. I'm head of social media. I'm scheduler. I'm candidate. I'm speechwriter. I'm researcher. I mean, I am doing it all. And that's exactly what I would do in Washington as well. I mean, I'll have a whole team with me, but knowing what this role means, knowing the responsibility, and also knowing, for the opportunities when I was Miss North Dakota, when I was Miss America, when I was at Brown, when I was at Harvard, people continuously underestimated North Dakota. And even in this race, there's very little coverage, and it is possible that a Republican is not going to win. And that's the same. It's the same in DC. And so, throughout my whole life, I have been underestimated. And I think part of it's being a woman, part of it's being from North Dakota. And I've always proved them wrong. And so I say for the people that have supported me, I thank them. But for the people too that have discouraged me or said there was no way I could possibly do it, they just make me work harder to prove them wrong. So for North Dakotans that are out there, I'm here to represent you. And I gave up a lot to do this. I had a job with a big law firm that, was kind of the path of what you do after Harvard Law School, but it was representing our state, representing the women, equal rights, upholding democracy that were so important to me that I knew, this is what I need to do now, because if I didn't run, I would always wonder what if, and I don't want that.
Sounds great. Okay, well, that's it for today. I hope y'all enjoyed it. I know that there's a whole lot of people in North Dakota that are going to be watching this, and I'd have to agree. Take a look at the voting records, take a look at where the money comes from, and see who best represents you. Anyway, it's just a thought. Y'all have a good day.